Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things. And last week I made a pretty sweet realistic imagining of Bowser versus Mario. Quick side note though, due to an editing error the sound was off by about 15 seconds, so I had to re-upload it on a Monday morning at 7 AM and it's been lost to the algorithm. So help a brother out and go watch that one after you watch this one. Don't let the machines win. Anyways, the time I couldn't decide on whether I wanted to make Bowser or Yoshi, but settled on Bowser because reasons, and I don't regret it, but I still wanted to make Yoshi. Then I remembered that I am captain of this tiny nerdy ship, so I'm gonna make Yoshi. So after spending countless hours using my unrivaled artistic skill to create a truly lifelike interpretation of Yoshi, I'll trace out where the armature will go so that I can bend my wire into an appropriate shape before mounting it on my mounting block. Fun fact, instead of drilling new holes for Yoshi's feet, they're actually going in the exact same holes Bowser used. I've also got one leg stepping up on a riser because I plan on having him standing over the corpse of his defeated rival. Now eventually I'll run out of time and go with a much simpler step, but at least you know I had every intention of doing it. I think building anticipation, then crushing it with disappointment is a good lead into the holiday season. Anyways, I'll bulk out the majority of the body with aluminium before covering it in a thin layer of cause clay. Cause clay is nice and sticky and bendy when baked, so I like to frame my armature in a thin layer to help add to the rigidity before I start on the top layer of clay. I also realized my tail was a bit too long at this point, so a little snippy and we're sorted. I really wanted to make this as recognizably Yoshi-y as possible, so no long balancing tail here. Otherwise, once I've added some wire that will be my arms later, I can get it ready for the first bake. But before I do that, I'll score the entire surface to help my next layer of clay adhere a little bit better. The next layer of clay is super sculpty because I like how easy it is to blend and handle without leaving fingerprints or disfiguring the model too much. It also helps that I'm incredibly tight and I don't like paying for heating in my flat, instead relying on multiple jumpers and copious cups of coffee to keep me warm. So my studio is only slightly above freezing, which means my clay is nice and hard even when it's been warmed up. With the majority of the body bulked out, I can get started on the head. Again, the trick here is going to be making this look as much as possible like Yoshi, rather than just making a velociraptor with a turtle shell. I'll start by smooshing out the general shape and size of the head, and then I'll separate the top and the bottom jaws. Then once I've got a bit more of a refined shape for each, I can reconnect the two pieces. There's also going to be a decent amount of weight being pressed onto the front of Yoshi's head, so I'll reinforce the jaws with a couple lengths of wire. Finally, before I attach the head to the body, I want to add a bit more clay to his cheeks. Once I've jammed the head into the neck stump and blended the seams together, I can start adding clay and refining the shape. I made Yoshi's eyes using a couple of baking beads that I found in my pantry. Unless of course my partner's watching, in which case these are just rolled up balls of white clay. And I'll try and make the eyes as angry and scary as possible, but you know, still kinda cute and friendly. I modeled the eyes after cows, because while they may look friendly and inviting at first glance, one need only look a little bit deeper within to see the murder and hate hidden beneath the surface.
Don't kid yourself, Jimmy. If a cow ever got the chance, he'd eat you and everyone you care about.
Now, one of Yoshi's most important characteristics is his big honkin' nose mouth thing, so I made sure to make it extra big. I also really wanted to give him his big chameleon tongue shooting out, but ended up really disliking the end result, so I just left it out of the final product. I did, however, make his mouth similar to what you'd see in a chameleon, so that if you wanted to add it in the future, I could. I won't, but I could. Otherwise, all I needed to do was add some teeth and refine his gum line. Then it was on to texturing. Now last week, I made Bowser's texture using this tiny texture roller I made, and given that it worked an absolute charm, I figured I could just reuse it this week as well. To add some scars and lines, I'll drape the body in cling film, then add random shallow slices. If you're curious as to why I use cling film to do this, I go into more detail in my How to Make a Sea Monster video. To make Yoshi's hands, I'll squish a little ball of clay flat, then cut 3 lines to separate the 3 fingers and the thumb. Then I'll refine the shape of the hand and poke little divots in the tips of the fingers. I've got some leftover talents from a previous build, so I'll stick those into the tips, and then I'm ready to attach the hand to the arm. Once the hand's been attached, the arm gets bulked up a little bit, and then it gets a quick once-over with the texture roller. Then I can get started on the shell/saddle. I'll start by making a saggy pancake, then drawing the edges and adding the segmented parts. Then I'll smoosh some little balls on top before blending them together and sharpening the edges. Finally, I'll go over the entire thing with my ball stylus to give it a little bit of a fun texture. Then the only thing left to do is add his little dorsal spiky dealies and then give him some adorable little boots. Now y'all didn't think I'd forget his boots, did you? Not only am I gonna give him boots, but I'm gonna make them appropriately long for what I think his claws would need to be comfortable. However, with his trademark dino boots finished, it's time to get started on Luigi, which means we're gonna need a Luigi to use as scale for my armature. Enter John Luigi Zammo from the revolutionary big screen adaptation of Super Mario Bros. If you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it as it is truly a feast for the eyes. So once I've got an appropriate body scale sorted out, I can add the arms to the armature and then build up the body using aluminium and more wire. Then it'll go through the same process as Yoshi's body with a couple layers of clay to build it all up. Once I've got the general shape smoothed out, I can start adding the details. I'll add wrinkles to the pant legs by strategically placing tiny wormy dealies wherever the cloth would bunch up. A good trick for figuring out where the wrinkles would be is to just look down and see what's going on with your legs. Unless you sculpt in a dress, or in leggings, or in shorts, or naked, I guess. I'll add some little rounds to the bottoms of the legs to help the feet hold their shape a bit better, and then I'll add the flared out sections to the bottom of the jeans. Luigi's head is massive in comparison to his body, and I want to stick to that style, so I'm making my Luigi's head comically oversized as well. However, to keep the weight down, I'll start with an aluminium ball wrapped in clay, then I'll mark out the facial sections and get to the detailing. I want this to be somewhat realistic while still being very stylized, so I'm going to make sure that I keep his nose enormous, give him big beady eyes, and give him those elephantitis ears. I think it's kind of neat to see how quickly you can turn a random lumpy clay face into a mostly recognizable character just by adding facial hair. Fortunately, in my case, Luigi's facial hair is about as iconic as it gets, so I can hide a lot of imperfections behind a big bushy stash. Of course, it's not a Mario brother without his trademark Mario Bros hat. If you pause the video here though, it kind of looks like Captain Price wearing an Ushanka. Fortunately, with a few cuts and some careful molding, it's pretty easy to get a good copy of Luigi's hat. Then I can bake the head to keep it from getting deformed and attach it to the body before getting started on the arms and the rest of the torso. I really like the idea of a huge head, a big round belly, and little wimpy arms, so that's pretty much the aesthetic I'm going with. Though now that I think about it, that's pretty close to my own body shape. Anyways, I'll add the collar to separate his shirt from his neck, and then I'll add some wrinkles to his arms, and because this is so close to me at this point, I figure I'll go all in and give him a nice pronounced double chin. And with his neck looking like a thumb, I can finish his upper torso by separating his shirt into his overalls, adding some straps and buckles, and then that little pouch in the front. His hands are going to be in fists holding the reins of his noble steed, so I'll start by giving him little flippers and folding them into fists before carving out each of his little fingers. Now, I was trying to figure out the best way to make the reins so that I can remove Luigi from Yoshi's back to facilitate easier painting. I ended up making it so the top of the reins are held in place, and then I can set Luigi on Yoshi's back and attach the longer sections. Then once I bake it, I should be able to carefully remove the longer parts, paint them, and then glue them back in place. And as it started to be somewhat of a recurring theme in my videos, I can say that it mostly worked. Otherwise, it's onto the painting, and I'll start by priming everything in a light gray. Now, as far as painting is concerned, I'm going to be doing the majority of Yoshi using the airbrush since I want to get a nice gradient between his off-white undercarriage and his green top coat. The airbrush is one of those tools that I should really get more practice using, but it just takes so long to clean, and I'm so lazy. That being said, it is hard to argue with the results. His shell gets painted with a deep Yoshi shell red, and then I'll mix that with a bit of terracotta to give me a slightly darker mouth and throat burgundy. Unless, of course, it goes on the lips, in which case I'd call it a sassy and sexy dino red. The segmented parts of the shell get a bone white coating, and then the teeth get the exact same treatment. I'll also paint the tips of the teeth with a white so that it's not a single uniform color the entire length of the tooth. And his little dorsal fins get painted red, then I'll paint his boots orange before deciding that they're too light and repainting them a darker orange. Finally, I'll paint his eyes white and paint his pupils black. I'll also coat them in a little UV resin later to give them a bit more shine. Then it's on to Luigi. He gets a coat of pasty pale skin tone, followed by a darker highlight on his nose and cheeks, as well as a darker wash in the creases on his neck and around his eyes. Then I'll paint his shirt and hat with a rich Italian green, followed by a beautiful Sicilian blue for his overalls. Then his gloves get a basic white, his boots get a leather brown, and his little buckles get gilded. Then his facial hair gets a nice deep brown coloring, and I'll paint the strap between his hands brown. I find painting eyes tricky, but I feel like I really captured the "you'll never be number one" look behind his cold dead eyes. And of course I need to paint the little Luigi L patch on his hat, and I'll give all the edges of his clothing a quick white dry brush to highlight the edges and make it look like it's all somewhat well worn. And now, of course, we've reached that inevitable part of the video. It's time to make a base. I'll start by making my quick and easy basing paste, which is 1 part texture paste, 1 part sand, and 1 part random brown paints. These get mixed together and then slapped onto the base of your choice. Now, I gave up on the idea of Yoshi standing over his vanquished enemy basically before the video even started, so instead I made this thematically appropriate green tube, which I will then fill with a little more paste, and then to help build out the base a bit, I've also made a Yoshi apple and a Yoshi egg. Then once it's had ample time to cure, I'll drill a couple of holes for mounting Yoshi, and then crack out my flock. This gets held in place with some Mod Podge and applied using a static grass applicator. And the only thing left to do is add Yoshi, then a somewhat morose looking Luigi, and then a couple of reins. And with that, I'd say we're onto our glamour shots. As always, a massive thank you to the patrons that keep this tiny nerdy ship floating, and a special shout out to my newest patrons, Feather and Whimsy, Ben, Carlin Nicole Rieger, EOCM4752, Goose, and Catherine McCormick. You are the uncomfortably realistic dinosaur chameleon upon which I ride. If you liked the video, then leave me a comment down below, hit that little thumbs up, and consider subscribing. The first 500 comments will get absolutely nothing. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.